Welcome, everyone. We are back here for another episode of Awaken Your Inner Genius, where we are following the cosmogony of Walter and Lao Russell. So for those of you that are new, welcome. And for those of you that are seasoned, you know who our panel is. We have John Bonzel, Jim Porter, Karen Elkins, and myself here this evening. And we've got a big conversation that's coming. So breathe in and let's go ahead and take a moment to just tune in to the universal heartbeat of the ocean before we even introduce what's on the docket for this evening. So if you would, we'll pull up the sounds. You are welcome to keep your eyes open and look at the heartbeat and look at the ocean. Or you can keep your eyes closed, but just have yourself breathe in deeply and anchor in, inviting in the universal flow, becoming very present here in this moment. Maybe tuning in to where the waves are crashing, anchoring into your heart, bringing gratitude in for this moment that we have a chance to come together and share the teachings gifted to us by Walter and Lao Russell. Breathe in deeply, and as you breathe out, relax your neck, relax your fingers, relax your toes, and find your way back here in this moment. And when you're ready, open your eyes. So here we are, and I'd like us to take a look at this very first quote, where it is a favorite quote. John, I know you know this one off the top of your head.
Yes, because my golf game reflects that, especially the first part. Mediocrity is self-inflicted, and genius is self-bestowed.
Thank you, John. And Jim, what's this next quote, by the way, please? Jim's on mute. We'll come back to him. He'll turn off his mute button.
I unmuted myself.
Thank you.
If you can read and count to 9, you can master the secrets of the universe.
All right. Just wanted to remind everyone that this entire program, Awaken Your Inner Genius, is based on the Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. That's the on-ramp, and it takes you to the home study course. It's home study course. And so as you take a look at it, everything is about being based on these 12 units written by and gifted by Walter and Lao Russell to humanity. And we are actually in Unit 10. Can you all believe that? How exciting is that? Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And so if you'll take a look here, here's where we are for March. We have a big conversation here tonight. Bet there's not a lot of times that you're thinking about thermodynamics, but thermodynamics is the topic here for today. So welcome, Bonnie. Hi, Dee. And take a quick snapshot of what actually here is in Unit 10. You're welcome to take a screenshot of this to invite you to come into what it is that we're doing here. And I wanted to remind everybody next on this next slide is that the whole home study course, remember that they said, John, please explain this about what is the difference and the focus now in Unit 10 and 11.
Well, the Russells are now revealing, now this was in 52, 53 now, okay, when this home study course was written. And they announced new laws of the cosmos. So they're sharing with the world and basically the scientific world that what they have been studying for years is incorrect. The effects that they concluded, or the theories and so on that they concluded from their observed effects, was incorrect and not according to nature. So here in these next 2 lessons, the Russells are going to straighten the world out. All right. Now, I do want to say this, that science has come a long way since these lessons were written. And some of the things that we're going to discuss this evening may have already come into being. You know, they're not announced. You know, I don't know how you would ever know it. But anyway, I feel that science has come a long way since this was written. But the information and this secrets of the universe being revealed, don't take it lightly, because this is it.
All right, so I have a confession to make. I'll be honest with you. I want to play off of what I said at the end of our last broadcast here. And I wanted to really have us focus on about falling in love with the universe. So to me, as the first time I went through the home study course, I was a bit intimidated by Unit 10 and 11, I'll be honest. But then as I became more and more, as I studied over the years, I really saw it as a way to fall in love with the universe. So I'm going to ask each one of the panelists to comment before we begin. I want to simply invite everybody to set their mind aside. Their brains need to understand everything and instead trust the process and fall in love with what it is that we're talking about, hold space for it, because we are inching our way to Unit 12, which is one of my favorite units. Jim?
Yes. What do you
Are
want me
you
to say?
with us, Jim?
Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't know what the question is.
Anything you want to add and comment, just as anybody new might be listening to here for Unit 10. This is the big unit and a big lesson tonight.
It's I think it was page 743 that I mentioned to you, Kim. To me, that needs to be really read over and over again. I would suggest to people and meditate on it, because it just ties it all together. The previous lesson, everything that they discussed in the previous lesson, the one before, but the previous one, that one little paragraph brings it home and reminds you. It overwhelmed me, the reminder that, what we are and what we're here doing.
Okay. All right, John, a comment before I ask Karen. Just an invitation for people who are new listening in.
Well, if you're new and you missed the the first 9 lessons, I'm not sure this is a great place to start. But if you have a scientific mind, or if you're curious about certain things, maybe you'll pick up a few things this evening and then integrate them at your own pace and your own understanding.
Okay, thank you. And James, if you bring up Rita says this. She says, thank you for saying that, Kim. These concepts have been way over my head. And Rita, you know what? I felt the same way. And it really was a beautiful gift for me as I stuck with it. So there's a reason why we're each here. There's a reason why we're learning these things. And we have a beautiful team that's come together to have a conversation around these. And while this home study course is meant to be self-study, it is our hope that our bringing our love for the message and heart to it will continue the conversation. And so hang in there, Miss Rita. Thank you for being right there with me. And Karen, what do you have to say as we begin here?
I'm going to make a switch up if we want to, and start with the video tonight, just because the concepts a picture's worth 1,000 words. And so maybe by showing the pictures, the conversation will become easier. And then you guys will be able to grasp it without having to try to visualize it while we're having the conversation. And then everybody's trying to describe it in a way when maybe the pictures will do that for us, and that'll deepen the conversation. That's my suggestion.
All right. Well, I say, team, why don't we try it? I think we should try to have the visual journey then at the beginning. So thank you for the suggestion, Karen. And let's have it at the end. Let's bookend it so everybody can relax into these learnings. So thank you for the lovely suggestion. Karen knows when she's diving into this. So let us begin. Sit back and begin your journey of falling in love with the universe. right. All right, John and Jim, if you can bring yourselves off mute, make sure you're off mute. Karen, a very gracious thank you. Those were big concepts. I know our weekends are full of pulling that together. John and Jim, you want to comment before we dive in?
She's
Well,
marvelous.
Go ahead, Jim.
I just said she's marvelous. The talent is just so helpful. Thank you, Karen.
I want to congratulate Karen on the 2 charts where she colorized everything, the octave wave, and it looked beautiful. It really did. And I'm sorry I couldn't get something like that in the new home study course when we colorized it. But who knows? Maybe we'll do another version and colorize some more charts and so on. But wonderful job, Karen. Beautiful.
It gets us a start. And I think there's one thing that people should know about the Russell work, which was a hard one for me, is that the coldness is the cube and the motion is the cyclone, in a sense. And so when I've done this, you wonder why I'm using the cube so much, is because that is the Russell work. That is the framework from which the wave is contained within a closed system. So it's a must wave to visualize his work. So I've been as authentic with that as I can be.
Well, and I appreciate it. And so for everybody who's watching, when we pull together this panel, we have Ken Pearson, who is out ill this evening. We have Margaret Rue, who has also lived with Leo for 10 years. She wasn't able to be with us, but we pulled together this team because it had the seasoned students and it had newer students like Karen and I. And what I love about Karen taking this and bringing her graphics genius to the table is the fact that it's really a neat way for us all to learn together. So Judy says beautiful. Deb says best one so far, Miss Karen. So I love it. So we'll have a chance to dive into that. So why don't we go ahead and dive into this particular unit? So for those of you that have your home study course, we are on lessons 38, unit 10. And let's dive into page 741. Now, John, if you would just start with the highlight of the name of this and then go into those first 2 paragraphs, because I think it's really important that we lay down the groundwork for why they dove so deep into this.
All righty. Here we go. Prelude to the Russell's New Laws of Thermodynamics. And I think it's important, Kimberly, that we point out that Dr. and Leo Russell, they are who has brought these new laws of thermodynamics into the world. And later on in this unit, in this lesson, you'll see, and it caught me off guard a little bit where they said the 2, and I didn't know they were talking about themselves, that has brought this new knowledge to the world from the Creator. They didn't get this new knowledge from books and so on and so forth, but directly from the Creator. And I think it's wonderful that we get a chance here to interpret that. So here we go.
And John, before you go into it, for anyone who's new, this is from Walter Russell, who had a 4th grade education. He had no formal schooling in this subject, which makes the story all the more remarkable.
Yes, ma'am. All right. In the last lesson, we stated that a distinguished scientist said that he believed we would soon learn how to control gravity, from which marvelous results would follow. We also stated that science has already been able to control gravity for a long time, but does not know that it has. Let us consider this by giving a few examples. One conspicuous example is the projection of satellites into gravity-free orbits around the Earth. More conspicuous still is the demonstrated fact that astronauts can accompany those satellites and reduce their speed at will in order to lower them to the ground, where ground forces can control their area of landing. The very fact of ground crews knowing where they are at all times is another conquest of gravity. To be able to talk to them from thousands of miles away is still another conquest. For heretofore, man has been able to talk to others only by wire until radio, television, and radar has been discovered.
All right, I'll go into the next one, John. This all grew from the conquest of gravity by the airplane itself. Such a miracle would have been considered an impossibility during the end of the last century. A familiar quotation then was, "You could no more do that than you could fly." This phrase would seem strange to the coming generation. And so as we go through these next few paragraphs, John, do you want to give a summary of the next few paragraphs, or what do you feel that we should read? Because these are big paragraphs for a big subject of gravity.
Well, that is the one tool that the Creator uses to bring idea from mind onto the cosmic cinema. It's a two-way expression. All right. So gravity just isn't a one-way thing. All right. It's two ways, outward, inward. It's simultaneous and it is sequential. So compression, expansion. All right.
Now, John, let me ask you a question, because most people, many of us, let's think about this when we listen to this knowledge. So before we dive into that, most of us have no idea and cannot explain how a car actually functions. You could, John, but I couldn't. I could not tell someone how the car functions, why it goes, why the gas goes. So, but I somehow trust the use of a car. But most of us think of gravity as making an apple drop from a tree. So how are you and the Russells redefining it here so that anybody who's listening to this can really anchor in that word gravity?
Well, the avoidance principle of nature, that is not used anywhere. I'm a big time science guy. I went to school. I had a science major. That phrase, that concept was never used. It's not understood, because if man can't see it, right, and if he can't capture it with machines and so on, he's not going to be able to do that. So the avoidance principle of nature is one of those secrets that the Russells reveal, that as something happens, and in Karen's video there, she expressed that as something happens, it's voided, recorded, only to be repeated. So that's why in that first law of thermodynamics with Newton, he saw the apple fall, which was great. Okay. It doesn't make him a genius because he sees an apple fall to the ground. But what have made him a genius, though, is to have that understanding that as it fell to the ground, its opposite effect, its opposite gravitational effect, was simultaneously taking effect.
All right, so can I ask you a question that's not quite so serious? That avoidance principle you were talking about. The other day, I was thinking about the avoidance principle when I was eating a cookie. Is that possible? Can I avoid the cookie as I'm eating it? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I kind of like the
It just
idea.
depends whether it was chocolate chip or not.
Always good to have a sense of humor with these things. So
Oh,
James,
boy.
I think we lost Jim. I know you're working with us to get him back on. So let's keep going here, John, and let's go down to the bottom of page 742. And they actually go into detail about the conquest of gravity. They start to talk about the inert gases. I'm going to read that second paragraph from the bottom there. And it says, the
All right.
conquest of gravity by liquefying gases, even to inert gases, is still another seeming impossibility, for it is a reversal of nature's process of heating. Even as the freezing of soft metals to harder ones of greater conductivity is further evidence of the increasing power of the mind of man, and even the ability to create the fuels which hurl these missiles and satellites is another one of man's miracles. It is also a transmutation process, for it divides the very elements to get that part of them which serves their purpose and discards the other parts. So I wanted to bring this up because they talk about miracles. And John, this is part of what the Russells are trying to do, is to show us natural law so that we understand that this is science. These are not necessarily miracles. Is that a fair way to say it?
It is. And I think we should pause for a moment, and we need to discuss these inert gases.
Okay.
Not in detail, but we need to mention them. And that's what Jesus was referring to, that in my Father's mansion house there are many mansions. There's 9, the 9 inert gases. And so my beloved Karen, okay, is
not this Karen, but another Karen.
Well, she's just not as beloved. I can only have one beloved, but not as beloved. But here she is, a chemical engineer. So when I try to speak to her about the inert gases, what they are, what they do, how God uses them, how it's the bridge that God uses between mind and matter, and so on, we can't get on the same page because science just sees them, but they don't ever want to know why they don't react with any other element, why they don't combine with themselves and so on. They're just there. Now they do use them, like they just mentioned, for the fuels and so on, right? For missiles and that kind of thing. I mean, they use it, but they don't understand what they truly are.
Okay, so let me pause for a moment, John, and Karen. So let me just, so I want to just reference that so share with the audience, show the audience what this is. And if the audience would please just write down in the chat box, inert gases, become familiar with that term because it ties into what's here. And so I'll have John explain it. And then Karen, I'm going to you. What is this, John?
So there you have, that's Dr. Russell's chart of the elements number 1. And he takes you through the 9 inert gases, and it would be well for you to study these and to also note the color of each inert gas. Now we see neon lights, right? All right, you see behind me, you see the green here for my uranium glass. All right, not that that itself is a inert gas, but it came from its inert gas, and that gives you an idea of the position of where it is in the wave. All right, just simply by its color sequence. Now, Kimberly, she's wearing red tonight. We know that's male, right? I should be wearing my red shirt, but anyway, no, just kidding. But those basics, if you understand that, right? Red male, blue female, female magnetic, red compression male. Those are the building blocks that got us to this point this evening. So it's not that we're discovering something new. The Russells led us all the way up to this point. So take those basics that we learned and you say to yourself, okay, now we're integrating them in. We're showing you how they really works in the construction of matter, how God brings it into being and takes it out of our sense range.
All right. So John, we're going to go into more detail here, but do you want me to show a colorized picture of the inert gases right quick?
Yes, that would be beautiful.
All right, so hold on. Let's see if Kimberly has the ability to do this. So the advantage to much of what we do now is the fact that we've come a long way from what they all had available at some point in time. So let's see if I can bring this up. So James, if we could show what I just added. I'm going to go ahead and move this to the stage.
Got it.
There it is.
All right, there it is.
Yes.
Okay. So what are they looking at? So for those of you that are new, remember that you don't have to understand exactly what this chart is yet. But I do believe that when I first walked into the Russell Museum, I had an intuitive knowing that that periodic table was one of the most important illustrations that were in the museum. So John, in a snapshot, what are we talking about? And then Karen, I'm coming to you.
Right. Now, I think what's important for people to realize, and Karen did such a beautiful job here, of the red blue. So each octave, all right, has its 4 swings, its 4 steps, male, female. And if you will, for example, so all of the elements that you see, they're mated pairs. And we're going from 0 coldness of space, and alphanon is the first inert gas. That's
don't get too deep, John.
I'm not going to go deep. So we got alphanon, right? And it goes all the way. And so the last inert gas, right, is niton. And from that inert gas, those remaining elements that you see there reach such a tremendous speed. And Karen also had a graph of what's happening within the makeup of that inert gas, to where the speed of light is around 170 some thousand miles per second. And then it eventually goes back to 0 of space. Only then to be reconstituted and start all over again. But here's what's interesting too. I want the world to know this. The first 3 octaves of creation, man hasn't even discovered yet. So there's 23 elements that are out in space that man just does not have the equipment yet to identify those. But someday he will. So, but
all right, but John,
so
keep it simple here. I want to just show people something right quick here. What you're talking about is the 4 swings, is that this is, let's just say 7th octave. This is what you're talking about, is everything that we have talked about is the same principles: 4 in, 0, 4 out. 4 in, 0, 4 out. So,
Yes.
okay. So I just want to remind everybody, just not as confusing as you think. We're gonna dive in a little bit deeper, but let's just go back to the lesson. Karen, what's your thought before we
In
continue?
that chart, you'll see that the bluer colors are on one side and the hotter colors on the other. And I think people should know that's a periodic table, but it's based on the idea of sound, color, light, and chemistry. And so it's an all cascading one thing all together that they can actually understand. And the way they go back and forth from hot to cold, you can think about how a volcano works. At the bottom of a volcano is always the aquifers. It's water. It compresses us up like a cone shape, like what Walter Russell has. It gets to the point where actually all of the gases, it's all one. So there's no more liquid, solids, gases. It's all one. It transmutates. It goes, explodes again, spirals back up, rains back down. So what you're seeing is this continual cycle of birth and death and recycling that we see here on Earth is the same thing that happens in the heavens. So it's one way for me to kind of say, yeah, it's all one. And
All right.
even how chemistry builds, it builds in building blocks. It builds and it keeps building. There was a guy called the model of Sam, and it showed how from building blocks, from squares and triangles, they all built and they built and they just kept building. And I think that's how Walter Russell could actually understand how the table of elements would evolve and why other people were missing it.
All right, so let's just all breathe into this, relax into it, because it is about the creator and it is the creator showing us the way things work. But it is time for our first break. So go shake off any of those uncertainties that you have of making your brain hurt and just relax into it. You don't know how the whole idea works when you're breathing in and out. You don't necessarily know how your heart works, but it works. So let's just trust the process and trust the flow. We will see you in 3. All right, if you'll find your way back. And I want to leave the quote up there for just a minute and bring your attention to it, because this comes right from where we're going on this next page. God's highest goal for man is his or her own omnipotence and omniscience. I found that to be incredibly powerful. And so that is where we are going next. So as we bring our panelists back on stage. So I'm not sure. We're waiting to see how we lost Jim, but we'll do the best we can without him. The joy of technology these days. So let's go ahead and dive in. Dive into page 743. And John, Jim had requested to go over these two paragraphs, but we've lost Jim. So if we'll go to where it says, where they have the yellow, go scroll down a little bit more. And that paragraph that's got several highlighted parts, up to a century ago. John, you're on mute.
Oh, I am? Okay.
All right, there you go.
We're good?
We're good.
All right. Up to a century ago, man had not begun to make any conspicuous use of the power to control gravity. God alone had that power. When the steam engine was invented, that God power began to multiply in man. That is what God intends for man, who was created to manifest his creator on earth. God's highest goal for man is his own omnipotence and omniscience. Man already has God's omnipresence, for his every thought and action extend to the farthest star and end in himself. That includes their unity with every other human on earth, and this spells out the brotherhood of man relationship.
And I'll read that next one. The tragedy of present-day humanity is that mankind is not aware of its power, nor of its real source. Notice source is capitalized. For if it were aware of these things, man could not possibly slaughter other men in his barbarous, unholy wars. All right, so let's talk about that for a moment, John. Let's talk about those three omnis. And Karen, I'm going to ask you even to chime in, because in this paragraph, I mean, even though we're talking about science, we're talking about the highest goal is for man, for his own omnipotence, omniscience, and he states that man already has God's omnipresence. What does that mean?
I thought that was interesting, because I kept saying to myself, well, where's the third omni? And isn't that interesting? They didn't bring it up because man already has omnipresence, because man is God. Man is directly of God. So the only thing man has to do now is to realize his omniscience and his omnipotence. So his power and his knowledge.
So let's if Ken were on here, he would give us a dissertation on the three omnis. He's been talking and lecturing on the three omnis for many, many decades. And so I would encourage everybody to put in the chat box the three omnis, because that is a centerpiece for this. Karen, I was just curious about when you were reading this, what did this sentence mean to you?
Well, when you actually look at the science of everything that we're doing, if you're made of light spins, we come in and we fold and we refold, you realize you're already one with it. And so the destruction that's going on in the world, where if you're not this or that, is utterly insane. So that's how it feels to me. So we are light. And so, yeah, it's actually pretty simple when you get that part. So it's always ever present. It's always there with you. It never leaves you. So to me, I had to put last week, I had to look up omnipresent. Then I put it in the chat box, what they were. Always here, always present, never without.
Well, and I would encourage everyone, do remember back in Unit 1, they talked about meditation. I would encourage everyone to please meditate over those three words, because those three words, we do need to have an understanding of them deep within our heart, deep within our heart. So hello, Kenneth. Hello, Cindy. Hello, Margie and Deborah. So good to see you all. And I see you, Miss Judy. So those three omnis are really, really important, critical to the whole overall message. So as we go into, the Russells start talking about a new law of thermodynamics. And so, John, why do you think this whole rest of this particular lesson, they present their new laws of thermodynamics? Why do you think they did this? This was pretty bold when we think about the fact that this was published in the 1950s. They were literally trying to influence an entire modality of thought that they knew could change the world.
Well, when you get that little tap on the shoulder from the big guy and said, "This is what I want you to give to the world," you kind of go ahead and give it to the world.
You do it. So at
So-
the bottom of page 743, it talks about, they go into the Russell's new laws of thermodynamics. And this is what Karen was diving into. So they talk about past lessons, and especially the last one, have very plainly explained the creator's process of causing a visible universe of hot light of suns and stars to appear from the inconceivably cold light of space. So let's pause for a minute. The cold light of space, okay, hot light of suns, and then to disappear into it, or as man describes it, to be swallowed up by it. Yet man has never been able to discover that process. The main reason for that failure is that his concept of the creation of the visible light universe is that it was created out of some cataclysmic happening in the universe, which resulted in a great ball of fire. All right, John, so let's set the record straight, because they go on to talk about how it's really strange that whole code of laws were even written.
Well, and it blows my mind that the scientific world is still that ignorant to think that something like, now, where did the big flame come from? And what caused it to explode into billions and gazillion pieces to just be there in this orderly fashion, in absolute perfection, thinking that all of this is going to entropy, all the light's going to go out one day and it's over.
Well, I will be a little more loving in the way that I would approach it.
All
what
right.
I would say, Mr. John, okay, what I would say is that and the facilitation world that I come from, corporate, what it's about is that there's a principle called anchoring, and that when someone says something, a thought that's laid down, the whole rest of the group is swayed by that whatever was said at the very beginning. And so you have to be very careful about how you influence group dynamics, because if someone says it's sunny outside, the group is going to be inclined to think it's sunny, even if it's raining. So what happened to science, religion, with many of the modalities in our universe, is there was an anchoring of thought. And that has been of which all subsequent thought has been built upon. And what the Russells are in effect doing, and part of what impressed me so much about them, is they were, boldly and courageously saying, we need to rethink. We need to awaken ourselves to what is real, what is really truth.
Yes, because they were taken behind the veil of creation and to see that two-way expression of motion. And they're trying to bring that discovery into the world. And like I said earlier, I think man is discovering it slowly but surely, but still, science denies, that the creator is who creates. So hopefully someday they'll get over that.
Karen?
There was one, the closing of the last chapter talked about how we have the wrong structure of the atom.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, and we never really went into that, and he structures it into the wave cube. But if you look at the wave cube as male and female, it's half and half. And when you look at it, what he's talking about is two waves coming together, creating what they call standing waves. And through those wave structures, we get up the nature of our reality. We get a Karen or a James or a Jim or whatever, right? We get that configuration within those patterns. And so when I was looking at the structure of the atom, could that be possible? Well, at the end of this chapter, we talk about bubble fusion. We talk about how we get sound. And sound is when the wave and the two bubbles come together, they collide, they go implode, and then they explode. And that's called bubble fusion. And when we look at fusion is nothing but an explosion of light. But
now, fusion is not on the Russell work, but you're saying from your experience.
No, it's in the Russell work. It is in that last chapter. It's even in this. So what he's talking about, he does mention it. So the fusion is coming together of particles of light that collide, that make the sound, that make the light.
Okay, well then that actually goes into the top of 746. So let's dive in there, because this is a really important sentence. So for everyone who is tuning in tonight, the first yellow highlighted sentence there on 746, it says, light is the one thing which constitutes creation. Light is the one thing that constitutes creation. And you actually brought.
I think it's
Yeah.
important, Kimberly, to point out at this point right here, light is the one thing which constitutes creation. All right. So anything that is moving is creation. So anything that man can see and smell and touch and be involved with is creation. Not to be mistaken for the undivided white light of the Creator.
It's particles moving in the way of arranging and rearranging, inform to inform.
Yes.
Would be a good way of saying that.
Okay. So I'm going to jump ahead because Karen, you did a lovely job of bringing this last comment on this particular paragraph, saying all of the consummate illuminates, such as Krishna of the Bhagavad Gita, Jesus and Buddha, have told us that God is light. To presume that man has created light by his own activities is to claim that he created God. And so they go on to talk about optics, and they go all the way down to the bottom. And this is what you all are talking about in the green highlight. It's saying, okay, and I'm going to go to that is God's way, the last yellow highlighted. They were talking about God's way of intercommunicating and recording the actions and reactions of interchanging pairs of opposites in his universe. Okay, and that is man's way also of multiplying space silence into audible sound by his radar system. In fact, the multiplication of silence into sound parallels man's multiplication of invisible light into visible light. Both light and silence are eternal. Please jot that down in the chat box. Both light and silence are eternal and basic, while visible light and sound are transient repetitions. All right, before we dive in deeper, let me ask the panel this. So I was working with someone who was from another country the other day, and they were using the terms, I am nothing, but the Creator is everything. I am nothing. And many of religions have a way of kind of bringing themselves down to a very low level. And to me, I actually invited them lovingly to say, be very, very mindful of how you're saying that, because what you're speaking is in fact speaking something into creation. And that's what this paragraph actually spoke to me, John. I was just curious about this. I mean, that's why sound is so important, is it not?
Right. So I'll give you an example. Earlier on, when we were in some of the early units, I gave an example from the movie Copying Beethoven, to where this lady was assigned as an assistant for him. And in her own right, she was a composer and a great pianist, but here she is helping him finish his Ninth Symphony. And she was writing as he was dictating. But anyway, so she just paused and looked at him. And she asked him, she goes, "Where does this come from? How do you do this?" And he says, "It's the silence in between the notes is where it is." Of course, that was beyond her comprehension. Okay. But just know that. So sound comes from the silence and returns to it. Okay. And it's that simple. We don't need to overcomplicate it. All right.
Right.
I can see Karen's anxious.
If we sit in stillness, there's nothing really moving. But when I start doing moving, then I'm starting to move particles. And when the particles start to move, they start colliding. And that's when you get sound. So, and that sound is you coming into the fold. You're coming in. Your voice is your mechanics. It's your vibration. It's your frequency. And I agree with you, Kimberly. I think when we degrade ourselves, when we come from light, when we come from God, why would he make something lesser than? And I think the Russells basically said that you wouldn't make something lesser than. So what you're starting with in the beginning is don't be mediocre. You are one with the Creator. Tap in, which is really what the course is about. Tap in, and that's where the genius comes from. It's you being that person receptive, and then having, I'm going to call it the kahunas, to go out and say, how did they have the guts to go do that? And say, this is what it's been gifted to me to bring to the world.
Love that. John?
Kimberly, I want to just build on what Karen was saying about sound. And I want to focus on the octave wave over your right shoulder. Okay. And you will see, now you've got elements that are locked in that wave on both sides gyroscopically. And that was one of the notes I made to myself this afternoon in reading the lesson. Now, just think of these waves that you see, the big circles. Now, they're spinning on that wave axis at the speed of light. But in between each wave is a black space, which God is. So they're building. Now, look, they're both coming to each other simultaneously. 3, okay, 0, 1, 2, 3, and it's 4, 4. So that middle circle at the top there, that's when you hear sound. No, all the way up top. Keep going.
Oh.
Right there. That's it. That's where you hear sound. You don't hear that sound building until it gets to wave amplitude.
All right, now say that again, John. So because, I mean, so you're saying that actually the sound is in motion, but we don't actually hear it. It's kind of like a sonic boom. The motion is already in motion before we actually end up reaching our ears.
Right, right.
And then
So
the plane is long gone.
Yes. So until they reach wave amplitude, which is at the top of the crest of the wave, that's where sound is. But what Beethoven was trying to tell her is that he could hear with his inner ears that building process and so on in between before you get to amplitude.
Deb has a perfect comment on that one.
All right, let's pull that comment up from Deb Tonkin. Let's read that one, Karen.
Yeah, it is like the tidal coming in and pulling out. There is a space between the still point.
Yes, and that actually is why we do the meditation to the ocean, because it is that tide coming in and out. That ocean actually really says what needs to be said. Let's see what Deborah Emanuels has to say as well.
If everyone comes from silence and returns to it, it sounds like I heard that word sound. Sounds like we all come from the womb of creation and return to it. It is from the womb of creation where all light is birthed. Absolutely.
John, how would you respond to that?
I don't have any conflict with that statement, but you don't come and go. You're omnipresent. Only your body comes and goes.
Right.
Okay. I think it's important that we make that a differentiation there.
I think
that we are omnipresent.
But you're
we
part
always are. And I mentioned this before, and it dawned on me again this afternoon when I was reading. The greatest gift that we have received is life itself, that God created us, the man idea. And I know Kimberly is the love balance girl. You can see it there on her. But there is no greater act of love in the universe than God creating the man idea so that his thinking could be continued into forever. Isn't that a wonderful thing to know that you are forever?
Well, and Karen, I'm going to come to you in just a minute, but I want to admit, I mean, before I began to study these things, I did not treat life as if it was this gift. I mean, if anything, I was quite annoyed with it. So between the survival issues,
forgive her, God, for he knows not what she says.
But I'm mentioning this to you because this is part of why we're diving into the science here, because to me, the science almost gives you a reverence for the beauty of the process. And when I talk about falling in love with the universe, it gave me so much appreciation of the fact of, oh my heavens, this was an incredible gift. I was spoken into existence. The sound, the silence, understanding the pairs, and even understanding, when we have this thing here, we'll talk more about. That's to me what was incredibly powerful. So the science gave me a deeper reverence for life that I didn't always have before. Karen?
And I think Deborah kind of puts it in a really basic. You can think of it as that cube where it's the mirrored reflection of light, and it goes into Walter Russell's periodic table, the crystal table, the crystalline structure. And you see it in the circle where it's a prism of light, where we're all piece of that light. So to me, that's where we can talk about, we did come from the light. We were a reflection of the light. So to think of us anything less than or dimming our light is kind of crazy, but yeah.
Well, it goes back to the lovely little children's song that many of us learned early on, "This Little Light of Mine." How much truth there is to that little song. Let's pull up Dee's comment before we continue. Deb Tonkin says this: the science grounds the spiritual. The science grounds the spiritual. And I
They're
love that.
mated pairs. They are mated pairs.
Okay, so spend a moment on that before we take a break. Talk about mated pairs, John, because this is part of why, in my personal opinion, that so many people have a misunderstanding of religion because we've made it only about one or the other. We know based on the Russell explanation of science that mated pairs, it takes both the male females.
Yeah, I mean that's a heavy one. I don't know how much detail you want me to go into, but yeah, like there's certain religions in the world that don't even recognize the female as equal and opposite and as powerful, right? And you know, males by themselves can't give birth. It takes a woman and a man to create birth, to co-create, to conceive, and to move creation forward.
Well, talk about the term mated pairs as it relates to science, and then I want to come back to this thought in just
All
a
right.
minute.
Well, in that graph that we saw earlier,
which
all
one?
right,
One of the colors? I'm going to bring it
Yeah.
up. Okay.
Yeah. And I'll keep it real simple, and it'll apply to any octave that you want to do. All right. But, you know, Ken speaks on sodium and chloride all the time. So we'll just keep that same simple example. Okay. Sodium is male, chlorine is female. Chlorine is on the blue side of the spectrum, sodium is on the red. But if you will look at them, and I have to find them here on the
We don't have to give that detail.
Yeah,
Do general.
okay.
I'll keep
But
looking
just
while you're
know-
talking.
just know that they are mated pairs, perfect mated pairs. And when they are combined with each other chemically, they form
I'll
a
show it.
cube.
Okay.
Form
I'll
a cube. And that a cube is perfection in nature.
All right. So let me show everybody what we're talking about here. So what he's saying is right here, sodium, and this the fifth and sixth
Right.
octave here. That
See?
sodium.
The sodium, and then its
Okay.
mated pair is on the other end of the wave, chlorine. Now,
Okay.
sodium will combine with the other female elements, and they'll each make a different element. But soon as you enter chlorine into that combination, the other ones will be dumped out, and then sodium and chlorine will again revitalize or come into being again. So, and you know, it's marvelous to know the potential of what can be done chemically with all the elements and so on. But man needs to know, he needs to take the Mendeleev chart of the elements and throw it out the window. It is not according to nature. Okay. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And it's not explained how God creates the universe. All right. And there's no way I can soften or sweeten that statement. It's just the way it is.
Well, let me give you an example. So when I work in corporate, so before we take our next break, when I work in corporate, one of the biggest conversations I have leaders bring up to me is, Kim, why do we all operate in silos? And I'm like, have you taken a look at your organizational chart? Everything is in boxes. I said, if we would begin to treat leadership as I will know we're making big changes in our organizations when we begin to create organizational structures that mirror leadership. That nearer nature. Everything we need to know about leadership is in nature. So you were talking about that previous, the Mendeleev elements, that was
right.
okay.
Mendeleev
It's all in boxes. It's all in boxes versus what this is trying to do is create and show the movement. Because when you begin to understand that in the wave lies the secret of creation. So these are the connections that we're going to be making. And what I also want to mention to everybody is I'll go right here quick before we take our next break. So John, you know, I found this when we did one of our first Russell experiences. I need to come back to a white wall. Let me come back to a white wall. And this is in fact a square. And let me try to do this. But when you spin it, what does it actually do? It creates that particular curvature, and that's just a very powerful.
Remember, so we had two of those. One was red and one was blue.
We did.
Right, kind of thing. So, so nature has complexity, and that's what man focuses on. He focuses on complexity and the effect. Unfortunately, he doesn't know cause. But if he would allow himself to know cause, he would look at chemistry and physics in a totally different way, and we would have a totally different world.
We would. So we have a lot more to say. So Karen just sent me a text. The internet went down where she is. So that might have been what happened to Jim as well. So let's all, I want to say thank you to everyone who's on board with us. We want to keep all of these people. We have between 30 and 40 people today. Nice job. Kudos to you for sticking with the science. It is time for a 3-minute break. Really important to take that 3-minute break. Even it's just to breathe in it, celebrate the in-breath and the out-breath, and just say, I'm not quite sure I get it all yet, but I'm going to celebrate and fall in love with the universe. So go stand up, take a break. We'll see you in 3. All right, if you'll find your way back. So do remember that this particular broadcast is based on the teachings of Walter and Lao Russell. You can click on, we'll have a link there in the chat box for you to get your own copy of the home study course. And we cannot stress that enough. You're having your own copy. John, if you'll come off mute, having your own copy of the home study course is really a gift. But why is it so important, John, before we finish the last 5 pages of this lesson?
Listen, the university, the home study course was written for individual study. Because if you don't get it, you can't share it with anybody. All right. So when you get it, then you can share. So it's important for you to have because it's a lifetime of study. You don't read the home study course and all of a sudden you look around and say, hey, I'm a genius now. I read the home study course. No, it don't work that way. Because when I reread Lesson 38 after 50 years, I was like, damn, man, this is incredible stuff here. You know,
Well, and we hear so many people right now talking about the ascension, talking about awakening. For me, I have found these principles to be absolutely pivotal in even my own expansion of consciousness. And that's part of what I love about the work. Karen, before I dive into 747.
I don't know what you were talking about, but I just love the natural law. It just tells you how everything operates. It gives you a solid principle, and you know that it's all created in its creator. And once you understand it, you can't go back.
no,
No, you can't go back. You can't go back not only in your life this time, but
Yeah.
every bit of knowledge that you're listening to. For all of you, that I want to give you all a great deal of credit for tuning in here, because you're carrying this knowledge in for all your other incarnations as well. So whatever cosmic path, whatever act you're in on your cosmic creation, this is tuning in here. So let's go into the bottom of page 747. So now don't fret as we go into this last section. These last few pages actually casually just lay out some new laws for thermodynamics. I love the courage of these two. I absolutely do. All right. So John, what is the first law?
all right, here we go. The first law of thermodynamics, as brought to you by Walter and Lao Russell, Cosmic Illuminates. First law: cold generates energy, heat radiates energy. Cold multiplies, it cannot divide, for it is the fulcrum of the universe, which must extend to multiply. Heat divides, it cannot multiply, but it can be multiplied. That sounds like a mouthful.
It is.
But very simple. So you take space. All right. Now, we were talking about cube boundaries earlier in the broadcast. So just envision our sun. Okay. And there it
All
is.
right.
in
I want to see
space.
John. So John, let's see in your motions here.
All right. Now, so if we could put a cube, right, and have the sun in the center of it. So the sun will emanate all of its essence. And if we could do that, it would fill up that cube. All right. So then what nature does is then take that, and this is what science doesn't understand. So once all of that material, right, expands into space and hits those cube wave field boundaries, that six-sided boundary, then the radar principle kicks in, and then it is focused and recompressed and wound up to create suns again. So it's just a two-way process: compress, expand. Compress heats, expansion cools. One gives to the other gives to the other, and it's just a two-way process. So we don't need to go crazy about it, but that's basically all that means, is right. All right.
Okay, let's keep it simple. We'll keep as we continue. So Karen, I'm going to ask you if you would read the second law.
The second law: every action must be preceded and followed by its equal and opposite reaction. Heat is the reaction of cold. Heat could not come into being saved from the compression action of cold, nor could it repeat itself without losing itself to the basic cold. You know, that makes me think of compression. When you take something and you just pack it, it gets so intense that, you know, even if like if something puts pressure on you and finally you're going to explode.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, listen, we do this with our clothes, and anybody who's ever traveled and they want to compress their clothes, they compress the clothes into little plastic things, and then when they get to wherever they're going, poof, that's what happens. So
Well, now, you know, the Russells talk about the vacuum of space, and that's what some people do. You know, you got the plastic things, you put the vacuum, you suck all that air out, and you know, and it's flattened, but let the air in, and it's right back, right?
well, and I bring up simple examples of this because these kind of principles surround us all the time. So for anyone who has their brain saying, oh, this is too complicated, or that old science teacher on their shoulder saying, you will never get this, I want to just remove that, lovingly remove that, and instead tune in, because we actually see these things all the time. So the third law there on the bottom of 747, third law: cold is static, unchanging, and unconditioned. It eternally lives. Cold light is the basic one thing of this universe. Heat waves are dynamic, forever changing, and dually conditioned. They are eternally living and dying to simulate life. All right, John, so if you would tap dance into that, because cold light seems to be a bit of an oxymoron, but it's not. And that's what
Right.
they say. Cold light is the basic one thing of this universe. What does that
Right.
mean?
Cold light is beyond man's sense range, his instruments and his senses, but it's there. So it's static. Static means there's no motion. It's there. All right.
So
And then,
is this where it begins to be kind of the opposite of what many of us were talking about at the speed of light? Because there's really no speed to light. Light is always there, correct? I might be saying that improperly.
yeah, let's.
All right, we'll save that for another lesson.
Yeah.
Another question, because that's such a question, I don't have an answer. Is that cold fusion? Is that where we're talking about the difference between something being cold and then the explosive nature of it bursting to light?
Well, that would be the control, the controlling of that is what you're speaking of.
It's okay.
But for example, if you could control the sun and its emanations, if you could reverse that and then force it back onto itself, which nature does, that's why the sun is there, right? But yeah, man's not there yet. It'll be another 1,000 years before we can have that conversation.
I'm much more optimistic than that, John. Karen?
I remember with a bunch of science guys, and there was something where they had created energy and it was cold. And the way they talked about it, it was something that Tesla always knew about, and they actually got to witness it. So I think we have been on the verge of discovering it. And but it is something that's not necessarily commonly spoke about.
Well, I'll give you an example. There was an MIT scientist that they showed, and he took magnets and he froze them to, I don't know. See, man has never found zero. He can't get to zero, because once he gets to zero, he'll find God. He'll find the static coldness of space when he gets to zero.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But what was interesting is this guy would take this magnet. He had the circular piece of metal. And he just took the magnet, and now you could see it. It was like radiating fog. You know, it was heating. I mean, it was radiating its heat. So he would put it right there underneath that thing, and he would push it. And that thing would go around that circle underneath the damn thing forever until it was acted on by something else. So man is gradually discovering some of these things that we're speaking of accidentally, and they're able to apply them practically, but they truly don't understand yet where it comes from. And once they do that, then it'll become a different ball game.
Well, and I believe that'll begin to create an entirely new world. And that's part of why I believe we are at the cusp of some of the greatest innovations that we'll see in the history of humanity. Karen?
I was just going to say, when I was with those guys and I was watching, I will tell you there was another dimensionality in the room. And that was a fact. And it actually,
you were just there with all those male scientists hanging around, and they were just loving on you is what it was.
No. We started dialing in stuff on the phone. It was bizarre. That's all I was.
All right. So let's see what happens here. Let's go into the fourth law. We're going to keep these last few laws short and sweet. Fourth law, cold light is the omnipresent basis of universal intelligence and energy. That's a very important one. What do you want to say about that, John, before we continue?
Let's say creator. Let's say God as well.
Give me that in a full sentence.
Cold light is the omnipresent basis of universal intelligence and energy.
That's why, that's why I made it the box in the presentation. It's the box. So if you wonder why it's the box, it's the box.
All right. I'm
That
sorry.
was Karen's thinking. All right. Fifth law, static cold and dynamic heat express their opposite energies at angles of 90 degrees from their axis of rotation. And so they go into a lot more description, but do understand the very last sentence. It says this balanced interchanging completes the wave cycle. So I'm bringing that to our attention.
Just look over your right shoulder again.
Okay.
All right. Now you see the reddish kind of tornado penetrating, right? Now, but you see, it says at 90 degrees of its axis. So the center is the thing, and then and those gyroscopic circles that you see are exactly 90 degrees on the wave axis, and that's where they stay. Right? They're locked in there. Doc calls them locked potentials. So
All right,
whatever that
Karen.
element is, it's locked right there on the wave. Now, if you want to get to another element, then you got to move that to the next
octave.
to the next gyroscopic position. Yes.
Okay.
Kimberly, do you have the set of cubes? It's the 3 stacks.
I do not at the moment. I asked you all what toys I needed. I do not have my cubes here.
Well, that's your fault.
I have lots of other toys, Karen.
Okay. But the 90-degree axis, when you think of boxes, that's critical. And it
Okay.
also gives you an angle of how the light refracts off of it, which is also the same how your eye cone comes out, how you receive light as well.
All right, so I'm going to keep going. We have only 3 more pages. So for all of you that are sticking with us, kudos to you. I want you to begin to celebrate. So the 6th law is cold compresses, cold multiplies cold to create heat. And then it goes on to describe it, okay? And it ends with the varied wavelengths are the basis of our mathematics. 7th law, long, low.
That was
Yes.
very quick on that one, my dear. That's a
Yeah,
big
well, that's okay. Go. You want to dive into it? Go ahead. Have at it.
it's just because the spectrum of light, imagine your rainbow. So if it's, again, look at your octave waves, comes out like the rainbow. And each time it gets bigger, that next color comes out. It's the bandwidth on the swing of the Walter Russell periodic table. There's your swing, there's your angle, there's your degrees. And then when you look at the chemistry, if you had your boxes, Kimberly, you could see how they go bigger to smaller to bigger to smaller, right? And how they stack and get bigger. And then what you're seeing is the building of elements and the building of matter, and how
You're talking about the boxes that get smaller and smaller and bigger, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so John, why don't you and Karen go into the 7th law and into the bottom of the page 748, and I will go get the boxes.
Oh,
That
that's so
doesn't
good.
mean we have to get married, does it?
Well, you were already married, bud. So
All right. The seventh-
you're Karen. Okay, so this one is the 7th law. Long, low waves of low potential and high frequencies constitute the invisible spectrum of low density gases. So the lower the waves, the less they're going to compress. Things are not going to go together really quick or really whatever, versus then when you have the short waves,
High waves.
you're compressing, and then you're getting the lower frequency constitutes for high density solids. So now that these waves are getting shorter, I'm compressing. When I have the other ones, I've got gas, I'm kind of relaxed and I'm loose. I think that's the best way to explain that. How'd I do?
Yeah, and for people, they need to try to visualize. Oscilloscope is great, but not everybody can afford and have an oscilloscope. But like the rhythm of your heartbeat, for example, it's very similar to what we're there. So if your heartbeat is irregular, man, you'll see that thing spike, right? It'll go way up and it starts to beat faster. So those peaks and valleys are now closer together, right? Right. And they're shortened and so on. And so I was just trying to give them a physical, something that they could visualize. Like Tesla, for example, I saw the other day where he's already invented a spacecraft that is faster than the SR-22 that United States has had.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But it also has in the front of it, it has a microwave type of, we'll just
material
say energy source that shoots high frequency microwaves at an opposing plane or substance and literally melts it.
Oh.
So I'm just saying, man knows, just like your own microwave in your house, for God's sakes, okay?
Yep.
Those are just high frequency waves. You know, they're just coming at that thing, and it's boiling water. It's not. I mean, I don't want to say it's rocket science. I guess it kind of is, but man, it's wonderful. So once you become familiar with these terms and processes, then on your own accord, just go about life and look and try to find examples in nature and in society to where you go, oh, wait a minute. That just reminds me of what they talked about the other night and that kind of thing. So,
well, and invite the creator into helping you see these things. So Karen, what point is this the box you were talking about?
No, but that's okay. It has it in it. No, that's what it works. Bring it close, because you'll see the stacking. It's okay. You'll see the stacking in it anyway. So what you're going to see is how. Okay, that's fine. It builds. Take that off. That's good. And then you'll see there's how it builds. So you go from little to big, and as you build and put those together, you're actually building even your chemistry. So that's how it kind of works. It's like one goes on top of the next, goes inside the next, and it becomes more complex. So when you look at chemistry, it's the more units that go together, the more complex it is. And then you could see how each one of those would develop a wave. Like the bottom is one wave, the one in the middle is the next wave. They're like layers of stacked, like a rainbow, layers of stacked colors. And the density of it creates its unique color, just like the rainbow of light. So if you
let me add to that, if I may, Karen.
Yeah, no, go for it. Yeah, exactly.
So the building block is the cube itself. And what Karen is explaining is that now that cube can be made more complex. And by that is that it becomes, we can take a giant cube and we can just keep shrinking it, or we can take a little one and we could just keep building big and moving it out. So no matter what we do, the basis is the cube itself. That is the building block. That's the one thing that God uses to communicate about the universe, to build and take things apart.
I'm just going to call you a blockhead. You blockhead.
You know, there's a new movie coming out that has to do with that. Something about, I don't know, called a blockheads, but
it was all the square box blockhead.
All right. So
that guy's a square head.
So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and jump us ahead. We're down to the last 3 pages because it's really important that we finish up with a very, very powerful image there.
Yes.
So it says here on 7749, sound and silence here in the home study course. We now desire to bring into the scope of man's thinking a new idea which has not yet entered human consciousness. Now, go on to the next sentence. It will strike one as strange to think of sound and silence in terms of compression and expansion, heat and cold, and other such cycles of opposites and interchanges of pulsations, but they are just that. John?
Well,
yes.
I'm going to ask you to finish that first paragraph.
Okay. All right. Let me jump back up there then. Okay. So second sentence, science has not been ready for this new knowledge because the old thermodynamic laws gave it no ground to stand upon. This idea of sound and silence is appropriate at this point in our narration because it parallels the new dynamic laws.
See, I think that's wonderful for our audience to understand that the old, or just read it again, the old thermodynamic laws gave it no ground to stand upon. In other words, it's there and man manipulates it to fit a certain narrative for them.
Right.
But that's not how nature does it. And the Russells are now saying, okay, here we go. We're going to give you how it really is.
Well, and what's important, and John, you as the former president of the USP, I know I've experienced this, is other people that have studied science that walk into the science and that walk into the Russell Museum here in Waynesboro, Virginia, and they begin to study the Russell work. It does take them a time to unlearn what they learned in traditional science and actually step into this. And more of them are finding that this is, in fact, far more true than what they learned in school.
Yes. See, I was the same way in high school and in college because I was a science guy. But there was nothing absolute in science the way it was taught. And there was this doubt in the back of my mind is like, well, why isn't it? Well, why isn't it absolute? Right. And so when I discovered the home study course in the Russellian science, I mean, it was just like putting a glove on. I was like, oh my God, there it is. Finally, you know. And so there's no exceptions. There's no, this because of that and whatever, but it is absolute. This is the way God does it. This is the way the Russells have presented it to us as it was given to them. And now you've got a great foundation, like you were saying. So these people, and they have to be open-minded,
Yes.
Kimberly, too, to be able to realize, oh, wait a minute. Man, all that crap they fed me, I regurgitated it back to them and I got my degree, but man, it just really didn't.
Well, I would tie that into there's a deep-seated need and desire to express in a more holistic way right now. And what I'm watching across multiple industries, please understand that I work across 24 different industries. And I am seeing, even with leadership, what I'm seeing is that people have an idea, a deep knowing that something's not quite right, that there's more. And so, Karen, I think that's what you're finding in so many of the science people that you work with. There's more. And I think there is a thirst. And for me, that was what was so exciting about the Russell work, is it provides an avenue to satiate that thirst.
I think the one thing when we go into the bubbles, again, if anybody wants to look something up, look up bubble fusion, look up bubble cavitation. And when you think about it, we're going to get in some other chapters where Walter Russell says there's only two things. There's plasma and water. That's it. Well, what does plasma and water do? If you boil water, what do you get? Bubbles. What do the arrangements of those bubbles do? They arrange into different molecules of matter. And then what happens when they come together? They implode and explode. They get pressure and then they come to light when they touch. So, I mean, it gets pretty simple once you kind of figure that out.
Yes. Yes.
It does call it bubble fusion. You can look it up. Most of the guys, when we go to Tesla Tech or any, they're always looking for that implosion sort of spark so they can talk about nuclear energy and and all that.
So I'm going to keep us focused as we go here to the end. So towards the bottom of page 749, they actually say with a highlighted sentence, this we will explain later while describing the 9-octave chart of nature step up and step down process of creating in this universe. And John, this is the chart that they're referring to, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what's important for all of you is that you can go to philosophy.org and go look in their store for the posters, and you will see these posters. And there are many, many students who actually get copies of these posters and keep them around so they can continue to see what the creator has to say to them. Karen?
Kimberly, if
The
I
block-
may.
Wait,
Go
John,
ahead, Karen. Go ahead.
Then just one thing. The boxes do the same thing. Somebody made in the chat. They were right. That reminds me of the Fibonacci series. Yes, it is. It's a Fibonacci series in motion. So it is that golden ratio when you look at the cube. So it's all one and the same. That's static. That's that frozen one. When it starts to move in the tornado, which you'll see in the video, and when you get the tornado, you'll get the motion. You get your Nautilus curves. You get your eyes. You get the fetus. You get all that stuff. I mean, it's
Okay.
here. It's even how the universe is structured. It's
All right.
very orderly and very predictable that way.
Love that. John?
Any great advertiser uses the term that you ladies brought up, to where they'll advertise something and here's the price, and you think, oh, great. And they go, but wait, there's more. So we should incorporate that. We go from unit 9 to 10, but wait, there's more.
So there's a couple of fun comments. Kara Mahan says right now, she says, yes, it's moving. It's a moving experience. No pun intended. Pretty funny, Karen. Woohoo! Pun intended. And Cindy brings up a good point. Cindy's actually been to the Russell experience as well. She says, I've ordered many of the posters. You come into my office at home and I have Russell posters everywhere. I know John has the same. I mean, so when you start diving into this and your heart is calling for some of this, even if you don't get it yet, I find just living with these illustrations. And just for a footnote, I want to remind everyone, if you come to visit the Russell Museum here in Waynesboro, Virginia, one of my favorite parts is coming into the scientific section of the museum. I love the art. I love the paintings. But when you see how Walter Russell took all of these things that he saw in motion, I mean, remember, this is before Adobe Photoshop. This is before computers. This is before any kind of things that he had the tools. He literally, John, spent all those years sketching out these principles as a gift of love to humanity. Did he not?
Yes, yes, and asked for nothing in return. I think it's important to their whole lives. And I read this the other day, where or actually it was on Doc's lecture series, where he said that their whole mission in life was to deliver this message, and it had to be delivered with male-female balance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's what makes this thing sound, quote, bulletproof. All right, so on, and that's how it had to be delivered this time.
So, and the reason that the home study course and philosophy.org that they sell the products is so we can keep the message alive. Because John, as you well know, I mean, that's what the purpose is. It takes money to reprint the books. It takes money to keep things moving. That's one of the biggest challenges, is because all of this was in storage for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to bring it to the world is because all the rest of us are trying to keep this whole message and this beautiful knowledge.
I felt like I was in storage for 20 years.
Did you, John?
Yes, but I've come out. I'm out.
All right. So being that we're close to the end of the time, I'm going to jump ahead to page 751. And John, I'm going to ask if you'll read that final thought and explain the image that we see on page 751.
Very good. That image came from the universal one, by the way. Thus endeth the expression of God's omnipotence as evidenced by the photosynthetic waves of light controlled by gravity, God's sole workers in the creation of the curved universe of our Creator's imagining. So all things come from the one, which is God. So they're sent out into the universe. They are controlled by gravity. It's a dual expression of male, female counterparts. And then eventually it all has to return to the one. And it's so beautiful in its simplicity. Now, we try to make it complicated. I think we want to make it complicated or think that it is, but it is not. Something is just sent out. God gives it out, and God says, come on back, and so that I can re-give it endlessly.
Endlessly.
It's so interesting when you say every drop of water has what they call a dipole nature. It has two poles. Your brain has two sides, two hemispheres. The way the earth operates, it's got two sides. One part comes in, one part it spins. There's nothing that doesn't have something that generates the spin. Even your heart does that. Everything in nature does that. You've got a
duality.
Duality. Duality. It's nature, and you can't miss it. Once you see it, it's like you can't miss it. So it's not even male and female. I think that's just one way of saying it, but it's everything.
So why don't we, before we make our final announcements of some programs that we have coming up, some broadcasts that we have coming up, we did agree that we would go back to Karen's 5-minute video. So we all laid it down. Now you all can sit back and relax. You've heard us discuss it, and now simply intuit and listen and allow your heart to bring whatever your Creator is saying to you. Take a look at Karen's visual journey. All right, thank you. That's the first time that we've done that, shown it before and after. So I think that was a lovely way to do it. John, your thought?
Well, it was just as beautiful the second time, if not more beautiful the second time. I would like to end this evening, or my portion of it, by reminding everyone that there is only one mind. Now, there might be billions of people on this planet, but there is only one mind, and we are part of that one mind, but we are expressing our awareness and our knowledge up to that point. So I want our audience to sleep on that tonight.
Well, wonderfully said, John. And so for everyone, we will be continuing our Sunday night broadcast. Next Sunday, we'll be going into lesson 39. We're still here in Unit 10. I do want to remind you that we've had to move a few things. We were trying to do these broadcasts extra during the week. Well, Tuesdays didn't work, so we're moving it to Wednesdays. So this coming Wednesday, the 19th, my beloved Ken Pearson will be here to talk about his power of recovery, his journey of recovery, and how the man who tapped played such a powerful role in that. And then the following week, we're going to have John. We'll remind you each week, John will be talking about, it's the following week is Jim. Forgive me. Let me grab Jim's thing. The following week is we're going to have Jim. He'll be talking about the Divine Iliad. And that's one of his personal passions. It'll be March 26th, 7 p.m. Then the week after that, John will be diving in to tell them a little bit about, John, what you'll be doing in April.
Yes, Dr. Russell's lecture series 52, 53, 54. And this is where people came to the palace and how fortunate they were to be able to sit in front of Walter Russell, literally for days and days, and having him explain that wave poster over your shoulder there, Kimberly. And it's wonderful. And so I'm going to try to pick out some goodies for everybody, in each lecture series. And you'll see that it's synonymous with what we're studying through the home study course. It's just him giving it to you directly. So it's wonderful. I'm excited, and I can't wait to bring it to our audience.
Beautiful. And then Karen will be following up with another session later in April. So we'll remind you each week. I'm trying to bring up Karen's right quick. And she'll be talking about, I'm not sure why it's not letting me here. Karen, I'll have to show yours next time because there it is. Thank you, James. You'll be diving into water. So we'll talk a little bit about that closer to April 9th. So I want to say a gracious thank you to everyone. Remember that we don't say goodbye. We'll say until next time, have a fabulous week. Invite the Creator to let you know all the things that are going to be happening. And remember that this is your personal journey. So please get a copy of your home study course. Feel free to check out philosophy.org. They do have some events every month where you can get into more interactive conversations and get those posters. And then maybe someday John will even show you all the posters that he even has around his home. So a gracious thank you to everyone, sending you much love. We will see you on Wednesday, at the very least next Sunday. Take care, everyone.
Okay.